Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm on the road. I'm in a hotel room somewhere in the US, and just there's so many things going on in the industry, so much in the news that I thought I have to create another video. And so here we are. Never a dull moment, as I've said before, and here we are. It's just kind of crazy. So today I have a couple things I want to talk about. I think we'll start off by a continuation of my last video, which is all about the irrational exuberance that I see in the industry. For those who've been following the videos for a while, you know that I've always been very optimistic that new demand can be absorbed by the market. The market is a very big market, it's a growing market. Lower prices will actually spur new demand, and everything's going to balance out and everything's going to be great. Unfortunately, I think we just don't know the word moderation in our business. We have too many new projects coming on at the same time, or starting construction, and then so they'll all come on roughly the same time. And what's going to happen is they're going to come on and they're going to flood the market, and the market's already kind of getting soft around the world. So I'm actually quite concerned about what's going on. Yes, there's projects outside the US that obviously are coming close to completion and going to start producing soon. The Qatari projects come to mind. There's a couple of projects around the world that are getting FID'd this year. For some reason, Argentina is back in the news. My God, I've been in the industry long enough to know that a lot of good companies have lost their shirts in Argentina, upstream companies. Just ask Repsol how the experience with YPF went for the last 30 years. Argentina is one of those places that always had a lot of resources. It's incredibly hard to do business there. You cannot trust the government, is the word I would use. Devaluation, currency, populist movement, labor unions, all these are big issues, but no one seems to care. We're not just doing one project, we might be doing one, two, or three LNG projects, all of them massive. This is the same company, a place that a few years ago, Exmar had a ship there, the Tango, and it couldn't make the LNG exports work, and they went to Africa. So, that's around the world. There's a lot of projects happening. I think about, Mozambique might come along again. We'll believe when we see it, of course. Tanzania is coming along again. And then we have the US. The US is at a different scale completely. We have had 5 FID projects this year, and potentially another 5 more in the next 6 months. These are not small projects. Most of them, Texas, of course, which is my project, my old project, which I hope to get to FID soon, but it's a relatively small, 4 million tons. Most of the ones that get into FID are massive, 10, 15, 20, 12, all these kind of big numbers are being thrown around, and I'm not sure they all make sense. And what really worries me is who's committing to buy the LNG from these projects. If it is end users, the guys who actually will use the LNG, I'm very confident. End users means that they have the demand already in place. They might be a utility in Japan, Korea, India, you name it. They have secure demand that they know about, or they're going to build power stations to take the gas. It's all makes sense. The economic makes sense, and they're kind of reliable customers. When you have the middleman, and who are the middlemen? You can call them what they are. They're portfolio players, traders, guys who are buying to resell. It could even be the upstream players in the US who are buying to resell. These are explicitly the definition for me is they're not going to consume the LNG. They're buying it solely to resell. And of course, when you do that, you're assuming that you're going to resell at a higher price than you bought it. Buy low, sell high. Makes sense. Unfortunately, I heard a number today at a conference that 90% of the contracts that are being signed recently from the US are being sold to, quote, middlemen. Only 10% is actually being sold to people who use the gas. Let's break down one of the projects that have just gone to FID, the Sempra Phase 2 of Port Arthur. So Phase 1 is still under construction. I assume it's going well. That's 13 million tons. Not producing yet. They have just announced they're going to start construction on Phase 2. Another 13 million tons. Wow. 26 million tons. 1/3 of Qatar. That's just to put things in perspective, how big this project is going to be. Okay, so 26 million tons. Let's talk about the new 13 million tons. The customers they have announced are JERA, EQT, ConocoPhillips, and someone else who's going to take 5 million tons. It was rumored to be Aramco and this and that. That didn't work out. The last 5 million tons is being bought by, drumroll, Sempra. The company that's developing the project is buying 40% of its output. This is not so different when you see that condo developer who builds a building and then he puts a big sign, 90% sold on the front of the building. And you think, oh my God, I need a condo in that building. I better buy soon. There's not many left. Well, guess what? When you do the digging around, 90%, how much of that is being sold to real people like you and me? Or how much of that is being sold back to the condo developer, i.e. never got sold? And the condo developer is holding on to it because he's speculating. He's speculating that the price of the condo is going to be worth more next year or the year after, whatever the case might be. In the meantime, I think it's false advertising. 90% sold is not really 90% sold to customers. It could be, 20% sold to customers and 70% sold to themselves. Well, in the Sempra Port Arthur case, 5 million tons out of 13 is being sold to Sempra. Not to consume, of course, but to resell. So in their rush to FID, they're selling to themselves. And somehow the banks have bought this. Is Sempra a household name in Thailand where they might want to sell the gas to? Probably not. But there's a lot of trading companies out there now. And there's only so much of the pie to break up. How confident are we that they can resell the gas? It looks great. The project is 100% sold. Okay, let's break it down further. Out of the customers that I mentioned, EQT, Conoco, and JERA, arguably only JERA is an end user, even though one can argue that JERA is going to resell it to a Japanese utility, and they're not really the end user, but they're partly owned by the end user, etc. Well, guess what? JERA only bought 1.5 million tons. So out of 13 million tons, only 1.5 million tons is going to be by an end user. Less than, a bit more than 10%, 11, 12%. So 90% of that project's output is being sold to folks who are going to flip the gas, buy low and sell high. Sounds great until you realize that all the other FIDs in the US have the same kind of customer base. So everybody's going to be chasing the same end user. In the end of the day, the gas has to be consumed somewhere. Who are the end users? Well, we're kind of seeing a problem with China. China's not buying American gas anymore, LNG anymore. And in fact, China is doing really well in other sources. Their pipeline gas from Russia, of course, is happening. Their upstream production has grown healthy. They're growing massively their renewables and their grid lines and the electricity lines. Solar plants in Tibet and electricity lines to the coast. So China may not be that massive growth market that has been for the last few years. And China is actually going back to a point-to-point LNG trade. This is what we used to have 30 years ago. You build a project for one customer and only that customer takes the gas. Well, it looks like China is the only guy taking the Russian Arctic 2 gas. So it's a point-to-point. They're not going to be buying from traders. In fact, the Chinese companies want to be traders themselves. A lot of the contracts they bought from the US, they want to be the traders who sell that gas. So now we have a lot of traders running around chasing a few customers. Who are these customers? India is always talked about. India is a price-sensitive customer. They'll buy more when the price is low. They're infrastructure constrained. Infrastructure is being built. Yes, absolutely. But can it take that massive increment? India's grow at 2, 3, 5% a year. It cannot take chunks of 20 million tons at a time. LNG in these countries goes to support electricity demand and displaces other fuel. These things don't happen click on, click off. They happen slowly. I'm just concerned at the volume and the pace of that new incremental supply is not going to be absorbed by the demand. You have Southeast Asia, growing market, fantastic, price sensitive, fantastic. But there's a lot of competition to sell cargoes into that market. Not only the Qataris, but also the Australians and everybody else is trying to sell in that market. And that market is, growing at a reasonable rate, but quite sensitive to the world economic winds. Europe. Europe sounds great, but we're in a situation now that Europe has got a lot of gas it needs. How much more gas is going to take on the open market? A little bit. There's always that uncertainty about what's going to happen when the war ends. I mean, Trump's obviously on a roll ending wars. If the war ends, Europe's going to go back to cheap energy. They need it because they can't afford not to have cheap energy. And I think Russian gas will slowly sleep its way back. Maybe not so slowly, sleep its way back. I know there's all these European edicts against it, blah, 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 blah. But they've been happily buying LNGs for the last couple of years when the war is going on, ignoring the war completely. Yes, they've stopped pipelines, but they're buying LNG. So I'm not sure Europe's going to be the customer everybody counts on forever. And Europe is a stagnant market. Is there enough market there, growth for all these new projects to come along? And these new projects in the US and elsewhere are coming on in a term that not only is the demand uncertain, the prices are kind of slack right now around the world. There's a lot of forecasts, and we all take forecasts with a grain of salt, but no one's expecting prices to go up much. And remember, the rest of the world is still buying oil-linked prices, and oil prices surprisingly low. When oil prices in the 50s and the low 60s, and you're buying at 12% in Asia, you're buying at $8. You can't really move American gas to Asia for $8. You're going to be really struggling. And so this new gas is getting to FID, and the only way it's getting to FID is by selling to these middlemen who are promising that they will find, who are not promising, they're assuming they're going to find the markets. Markets that are going to be paying more than the price that these guys buy the LNG from the US. So they're going to be paying more than the cost of the feed gas, Henry Hub or whatever, plus pipeline, plus liquefaction, plus energy use in the plant, plus shipping. And you need a market that's going to have a bigger margin than that. If the margin between TTF and JKM and Henry Hub stays high, we're okay. If it starts getting squeezed, these middlemen who are buying 90% of American gas are going to be in a world of hurt. And when they're in a world of hurt, these are all shell companies. Shell as in not Shell oil, but Shell as in companies, special purpose vehicles, you call it what you want, that will just declare bankruptcy. They'll liquidate. How long can you keep on buying cargoes of $30 million a piece and selling them for $20 million? Not very long. You go out of business pretty damn quick. So these guys will go out of business, or they won't take the cargoes anymore. They'll default. Who's going to be left holding the bag? Obviously, the bankers who finance these projects and, to a certain extent, project sponsors. So yes, it's a bit of a gloomy picture. I think projects like ours, my Gulfstream project, not a problem right now. We are focusing on getting the permit. This is a great time to get the permit. When we get the permit, we'll wait for the conditions to be right. Right now, we have high construction costs in the US. We have high steel prices. High uncertainty. Our esteemed president just said last weekend, another 100% on China. And then he said, oh, I'm just kidding. You can't work in an environment like this. We don't know what's going to impact our tariffs. So these are the input prices, and Henry Hub is not going down at 50 cents or $1 or $2. It's probably staying around $4. So we have high input cost. So the LNG price is relatively high. Produced LNG, the cost to buy the LNG for the middleman. And the cost and the price, the sales price is relatively low and not going to grow. And there's a lot of volume that needs to be absorbed. This is not looking good in my view. Not a good time to be FIDing. You should not, I don't think projects should be rushed to FID. We can wait. Let's wait till the market, till our costs come down. Our construction costs will come down. Steel price will come down. Labor price will come down. Tariffs might go away. That's what we should do. So, kind of from last week, irrational exuberance in FIDs. Slow down, you crazy child, is what I'll say. So that's that. We got to talk a little bit about this Venture Global settlement. I don't want to talk about Venture Global much. Obviously, I'm not too far away from them down in Plaquemine, so I got to be careful what I say. But, when the Shell verdict came out, we were all a bit surprised because they didn't really even get a slap on the wrist. I think they deserve more than a slap on the wrist, because I don't think that they, the letter of the law and the intent of the contracts, letter and intent, two different things. And obviously they played games. Now the BP settlement, it's $1 billion potentially, could be more, and there's a few other settlements to go. Now the market cap of Venture Global is 20 billion. You can probably take a few $1 billion hit, but really, this is not something a shareholder wants to be doing. Do you want to invest in a company that has to give up 1/20th, 1/15th, whatever of your equity in the project, in the company, to pay off a fine that they were found guilty of? It's a reputational massive damage. Now we have a short memory in our business, absolutely true. But you know, now that there's no doubt, according to the settlement, that they were guilty, how many other buyers are going to stick their neck out and make a deal with them? Of course, price talks. They're offering a very low price. Is that price realistic? I don't know. But either way, I think maybe justice has prevailed a little bit. Let's just see how it all pans out. I'm not here to comment on one way or the other, but there's a few more settlements to go. But I did think that the Shell settlement, arbitration settlement a few weeks ago, let them got scot free. This is a different arbitration panel. Maybe it's a slightly different wording on the sales contract. We don't have privy to these things. But either way, I'm kind of glad that maybe justice is prevailing. So let's just see how it all pans out. I don't want to say much more. I'm going to end with a positive note. I've been in the past talked about how the fact that upstream industry is kind of lacking lately, and the upstream industry, we need gas supply from somewhere, and we're not seeing enough upstream exploration wells being drilled, and now we're seeing exploration dollars go back into the upstream. I hope that lower prices doesn't stop all that, but we're seeing a lot of exploration happening in Namibia, in Guyana, even in places in Southeast Asia. So it's kind of nice to see a bit of uptick in exploration. I hope it continues, but unfortunately, we all know what happens. Low oil prices mean exploration companies usually stop working. So lots to digest. Comments always welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention. See you next time.